Joining me now is Trevor Loudon to go through a list that I compiled early this morning. I woke up several times during the night with this list running through my head. Half awake, half dreaming. I don't know why. I talked about it on radio today, went through the list. But I really want to go through the list tonight with Trevor Loudon. Because, I don't know why I kept dreaming about this list. And so I got up this morning and added to it. Now, it's a list that many of you might know just from studying history, watching my Brainwash series, my Siege series, my Sabotage series. But why this was going through my head last night, I don't know. But I kept waking up, try to go back to sleep, I go to sleep and then wake back up again with all of these lists running through my mind. And as I said on radio today, the theme that I was struggling with in my sleep was that all the signs around us are that we are headed for a really bad time in America. And I'm not sure there's an off-ramp right now. The deep state is throwing so many obstacles in the way of Donald Trump. Our friend who's been in the studio here, we just got word yesterday that Ed Martin, here's Paul Sperry. DOJ sources tell me that Deputy Attorney General Tom Blanche, a registered Democrat through 2024, fired Ed Martin on December 31st and effectively shut down the Weaponization Working Group office. The deep state's slowing Trump down, throwing him off. I think he's got some advisors telling him things that aren't the best. And all of this is waiting out time. And I don't know how we're going to slow down this list. It seems like it's too deep. And maybe that's really the theme I'm trying to give you guys, is that all of these things are happening at one time. 3 or 4 of these things happening, pretty big news. All of them, and this is not even an exhaustive list, tells us we're in for something that's been released already. There is something already in play, and it doesn't seem as though the Trump administration is going to be able to reverse course in the 3 years left remaining. I want to go through the list and get some historical analysis and feedback on it from Trevor Loudon, an expert on communism and so much more. Trevor, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Let's go through this list. So I woke up this morning and went right away to writing the list, kind of what I was having raced through my mind as I was kind of dreaming, but then would wake up thinking about what I was dreaming about. What I was dreaming about was all the things happening in the country that seem to be pushing us to world war and civil war. Here's my list. I'll go through it. We won't show it up because it's just my hand-typed notes, but let me just read them. Open borders and mass uncontrolled immigration policies to alter demographics, strain public resources, create voting blocs dependent on government, and enable infiltration of foreign agents. You want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I think that's 100% accurate. You've covered the whole reasons why we have illegal immigration. It's a plan to bring down America, a multifaceted plan to bring down America. It's nothing to do with compassion for foreign people. It is purely to bring this country down.
Weaponization of our immigration system.
Yeah, a weaponizer, exactly.
Okay, next one. Subversion and demoralization of law enforcement and military. Of course, we saw that with the COVID shot. We see that with DEI that got shoved in there, LGBTQ, transgenders in the military, and then subversion. You get people in the military during the Biden regime saying the craziest stuff. I want to understand white privilege and whatnot. Then you have sheriff departments and police departments around the country giving press conferences openly saying they're willing to go to war with the federal government over Trump's constitutional right as president to remove illegals, and particularly gang members, Trendale Ragwa, MS-13, terrorist gangs from the country. So subversion and demoralization of law enforcement and military.
Yep, it's been going on for a while. That's also the reason why the Soros groups and Marxist groups are putting in so many left-wing DAs into positions of authority so that, even if bad guys do get caught, they don't get prosecuted. They get let back out on the street, which demoralizes the cops. The cops tend to leave or retire early to be replaced by some of the same kind of people we're trying to get rid of.
Here's my next one. Infiltration and weakening of churches and religious institutions to promote what I call Marxianity, for an emphasis on the material over the spiritual.
Yeah, well, that's the big one, Brandon. We could go to spend the whole show on that. But yeah, look, that's we've talked about that for a long time, Brandon. The woke church is the Marxist church. And then you get the prosperity gospel type churches, the weakening of the message. the turning of churches into entertainment centers. So, and the complete Marxist takeover of virtually every Bible college in the country. So be very discerning, parents, where you send your kid to go to school. You may send them to a school that was once Christian, but it may no longer be, even though it still pretends to be and still solicits your money. Campus Crusade for Christ, InterVarsity, all of those organizations as well are taken over by the Marxists now.
Funding and empowerment of non-government organizations and public-private partnerships that undermined and destroy constitutional order and protections with no public accountability in order to stop their crimes and advancement. No public accountability to stop them. Use funding and empowerment of these NGOs and public-private partnerships.
Well, that's right, Brandon. They sold us the idea of public-private partnerships to bring the accountability of the private sector and the competitive instinct of the private sector into government. What it does is ties the profit sector of the profit motive of the private sector with the complete lack of accountability of the public sector, leading to a massive rip-off of taxpayers everywhere this concept is applied. I'm of a more old-fashioned school, Brandon. Public should remain public and private should remain private, and you shouldn't mix the two. It is dangerous, it is subversive, and it is a way to rob the public purse, but also to bring socialist ideas into the private sector. So, yes, you're right. NGOs are doing work for a lot of NGOs did work for the Biden administration that they couldn't constitutionally do. So they give government money to these NGOs who then act as an arm of the government to do some pretty bad stuff. But the government sort of tries to say, no, it wasn't us. It was this NGO. So yes, both are a huge problem.
One we've talked about a lot, foreign enemy states with terrorist proxies in the U.S.
Yep, we have the Chinese here creating mayhem. China burnt Ferguson, Missouri down in 2014. China was behind Black Lives Matter. China was behind the George Floyd riots. China is now heavily involved in the anti-ICE riots, as is Venezuela, as is Mexico, as are the Russians, as is Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood. But other than that, it's all very clean. It's all very good.
Foreign enemy states funding street riots, protests, and the discrediting of the law.
Yeah, well, that's basically covered that last time. Yeah, look, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is the Marxist, Maoist, pro-Chinese group behind the latest ICE riots, the people who organized all the George Floyd riots, they are deeply tied to the Venezuelans and deeply tied to the Chinese. They are getting help from these people. They're getting guidance from these people. We've got to understand what's happening in the streets of America is directed from China, from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Tehran. All of the from the deep state down to the street level protesters and radicals, this is all a foreign communist operation against America.
Next one. Foreign enemy states funding propaganda and brainwashing of American colleges and universities. I think Qatar is said to have given $40 billion already to our universities.
Yeah.
Does it count all the other enemy states?
Well, as Qatar is, and the Qatar is also giving money to a lot of conservative influences, which is why they no longer criticize Islam. Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm. And that's in my list, actually, coming up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is the thing. The Chinese, the Russians, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the Iranians have had massive influence operations going in this country for a very long time. We saw it through the Russians, through RT and QAnon. We see it with the Chinese, with the COVID propaganda. The Chinese gave us the COVID virus. Then their influence operations managed the response. All the states that had the harshest lockdowns are all the states with the most Chinese influence. The Chinese use their unions here to shut down businesses. The Chinese use their pet politicians to shut down everybody else. So, yeah, we have massive Chinese and Iranian and Venezuelan influence operations happening every day on our streets. We don't even know.
Infiltration of teachers' unions, foundations, and teacher training institutions to hijack elementary and secondary curriculum production.
Yeah, look, this has been going on since the 1920s. This was one of the first targets. You know, Bella Dodd, the famous Bella Dodd, who was a Catholic who became a communist and exposed a lot of the infiltration of the Catholic churches, was a leader of the teachers' unions of New York. The teachers' unions of New York absolutely penetrated the system. And what they also did, the teachers' unions and the communists, have penetrated the organizations that write textbooks and publish textbooks. For instance, in California, there's a man called Dwayne Campbell, a hardcore Marxist DSA member. He assembled a little group a while back to write history textbooks for California, all about Cesar Chavez, all about every communist thing you can think of. And because it's California, and it's a big state, California textbooks get picked up all over the country. So you could be out in Arkansas reading Marxist propaganda. You might be in a little public school in Arkansas, backwoods Arkansas, and you're reading pure communist propaganda if you're a third grader or an eighth grader, etc.
Here's another one. Foreign enemy states manipulating elections to remove trust in elections and government institutions.
Absolutely. I've maintained for some time the Chinese stole both the 2020 and the 2022 and 2024. I'm getting mixed up now. The 2020 and 2022 elections, and have interfered in many elections before that, going back to the 60s. But especially since the 80s, when the Chinese backed Jesse Jackson, who almost won the Democratic nomination, and Barack Obama, who did win the Democratic nomination in 2008. Look, the Chinese, the Russians, the Cubans have been interfering in America's elections for decades. They are the people who flipped Virginia blue. That was done by the Chinese. The Chinese influenced voter registration organizations, have turned North Carolina purple, have turned Georgia purple, Arizona purple, and they are deliberately targeting the elections all over the country. They aim to take control of elections in virtually every congressional district, so that either gives them power or completely destroys people's faith in the electoral system, so they drop out of it altogether, which serves the communists as well, and often turn to extremism because there's no way out through the ballot box.
You're getting into my list already, ahead of me. Capture of courts and the justice system to create two-tiered system that protects lawlessness, insurrectionists, breeds distrust and hopelessness, and centralizes power within the federal government.
Well, look, there's been a massive look. In the 1930s, the Communist Party set up the National Lawyers Guild, and that has got many thousands of members of left-wing lawyers. They promote each other like a little Marxist mafia. They've become judges now. They've been served on the Supreme Court. They are in the Ninth Circuit. They're in virtually every circuit in the country. And the left have also elected several DAs in major cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, etc., to basically subvert the legal system where left-wingers get free passes and conservatives are persecuted. This is part of the revolution, and the legal system is an integral part, a very important part of the revolutionary process.
Let's see, next one. Foreign enemy states with influence over media personalities, and social media influencers. You've kind of touched on that already.
Yeah, well, look, social media influencers, the Russians have been funding many influencers on the right, as have the Qataris. The Chinese are putting huge money into advertisements into major newspapers like the Washington Post, which influences their editorial line. When a quarter of your income comes from Chinese advertisements, do you think you're going to publish stories critical of China? Then you've got the RT, you've got Al Jazeera, You've got hundreds of little Spanish language radio stations funded and directed by the Mexicans and Cubans, pumping out propaganda 24/7 into the Latino communities of this country. So yeah, absolutely, we're under a major propaganda barrage in everywhere we look.
Then the next one, foreign enemy states that have captured and compromised elected officials. Of course, that's all happening in real time right now. We're seeing with all of the stuff being released on the Epstein case, and that apparently is the benign stuff, if you can believe it or not.
Well, that's what I've been maintaining for some time, that Epstein was a Russian agent, a Soviet agent.
Oh, wait a minute. I thought it was the Jews, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, look, there are 5,000, in the Epstein files, there's several thousand references to Putin, many more to Russia, and the odd reference to Mossad. But Mossad is the big deal, right? We all should be scared of Mossad. No, this is Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was a KGB agent, long-time KGB
wait a minute,
agent.
Is that Ghislaine Maxwell's father?
His father, and he recruited, apparently, Epstein into the Russian cause. So the Russians have got compromise on Bill Clinton, on, a whole, Prince Andrew, Norwegian royalty. And this is why the Russians have been able to do what they want to do, because they've got so much compromise on so many Western leaders, entrapping, just tempting little Western leaders into sinful behavior and photographing it. You get what you want. So there's that. The Chinese are doing similar things. The Iranians are doing similar things. The Iranians have huge networks in this country, compromising politicians. I've written three series of books. My Security Risk Senators names 40 currently serving US senators who are working for the Chinese, the Iranians, the Communist Party, etc. And my series, House Un-Americans, is looking at over 90 congressmen in similar positions, working with the Cubans, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, etc. Americans have no idea how deeply we're penetrated. We are penetrated way beyond what most people suspect. And, this is what we call a deep state, is basically a Russian-Chinese operation. And that extends all the way down through our politics, all the way down and into state level, into county commission level.
The public discrediting of elected officials as unworthy of moral and ethical respect. The public discrediting of elected officials as unworthy of moral and ethical respect. I mentioned that because I know some former KGB officers came to America and said, before we go to war with you guys, we're going to release a lot of trash on your leaders, pictures, videos that are going to shock the world, and you will have very limited moral leadership in your nation. It almost feels like that with what we're seeing now with Epstein.
That's the first thing I thought with the release of the Epstein files. This is going to cause, what young man wants to pick up a rifle and fight a war for a corrupt leader, a pedophile leader, so this is infecting Britain, many European countries, and it's affecting the United States. This is Joe Biden, this is Bill Clinton. Trump has been, because of his association with Epstein, I got to be glad to say 3.5 million pages is apparently no evidence that Trump did anything wrong and cut his ties to Epstein when it became apparent Epstein was doing anything wrong, but just the association is dirtying. The association causes people to, to pull back their support. So I thought, why are they doing this? Well, what Russian agent wants this out there now? Because to me, this is very likely a prelude to a Russian-Chinese attack on the United States.
100%. And you and I have studied the former Russian and Soviet Union KGB officers who come to America, wrote these books warning. And isn't that interesting? Both you and I both thought the same thing. We'd even talk about that this week. And both of us thought this is one of the same things we were told by the former KGB officers to watch for. Before we go to war, we're going to discredit as many of your national leaders as we can.
Victor Suvorov
That's
wrote
right.
a lot about this.
That's right.
And that's right. You want to go to war against a demoralized enemy. If you're a Democrat, you're thinking Bill Clinton's hanging around with pedophiles. If you're a Republican, you're thinking, Donald Trump was hanging around. He wasn't guilty, but he's hanging around, ethically compromised. Who else is ethically compromised? It's very hard to mobilize a country to fight a war. Like in World War II, people were behind FDR, and Britain, they were behind Winston Churchill. But if Winston Churchill was a known pedophile, you think it would have been easy? So this is something to watch out for in the prelude to war. And both the Russians and the Chinese are preparing for war right now. So I'm pretty perturbed by this.
The attack on the U.S. dollar and American economy through numerous strategic methods. The attack on the U.S. dollar and American economy through numerous strategic methods. Now, of course, we know Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the BRICS nations, which is more than the ones I just named in the acronym. They're doing that, this war on the dollar. And of course, President Trump doesn't want a strong dollar because he wants to increase exports, which, again, I'm not so sure I agree with this for many reasons.
No.
But
it's insane.
Not to mention what we're doing to our own dollar, but then what our enemies are doing in the economic warfare.
Yeah, look, you want a strong currency. You always want a strong currency. That is why the Russians and the Chinese have been buying gold in recent years, because they want strong currencies when the West when our currency becomes weak, because then capital will flow to them. And political allegiances will flow to them. Thankfully, Russia's so struggling in Ukraine, they've had to sell a lot of their gold, but that's gone to China. But there's been a deliberate weakening of the US dollar, which weakens the US economy, which weakens US resolve. And that started back in the 1913 with the Federal Reserve, to deliberately debauch the dollar. But now you've got foreign actors trying to accelerate the process to drive the dollar to near zero, and inflation through the roof, and crash the U.S. economy.
Here's the next one. Manufactured hostility between generations. Manufactured hostility.
Very astute.
Between generations.
You even see this on the conservative movement now. Oh, the baby boomers, they had it great, I don't
know if you've been listening to my show yesterday.
No, I wasn't.
Or day before, but I did a show on how the baby boomers now being blamed for all the problems, that they had it easy, and they made all this money through their houses they bought that have gone up from $30,000 to $200,000 or whatever. And I try to explain in my broadcast to these young people, wait a minute. Many of them were drafted into the Vietnam War. Some of them got their legs blown off. Some of their friends didn't come back. They had the energy crisis, gas lines, mortgage interest rates in the early 80s of 18, 19, 20%. This is baloney.
Exactly.
But this goes with the Maoist ideology of the four olds, right? Old culture, old values, old religion, right? And isn't it interesting that my wife does all the customer support and donor relations, and so she really knows what our audience is thinking. But we also see it in emails and texts and handwritten letters. Many of the boomers, their children have turned on them. They have no relationship with them. They think that their parents are legalistic, old-fashioned, religious, and many of them will tell us, my kids don't like us because we're Trump supporters, or we're Christians, we're conservatives, they're liberal, and they have bought the lie that we are the problem. And this manufactured hostility between generations, I think, is exactly what you do from your enemy state position, particularly as you're looking for the collapse of that country. Because now those parents aren't there having an influence on their grown children, but particularly their grandchildren, those generational values that maintain the republic, which I'm getting to in my list here. But I think this is so crucial for you to speak to.
Well, look, the traditional role of grandchildren is to educate the young, to educate them. And that's why I like intergenerational families living in close proximity, because it's great when parents are working, the grandchildren take the kids to the museums, the grandchildren teach them patriotic songs. The grandparents take their kids to rallies. So in destroying that intergenerational relationship is absolutely pivotal to weakening society to the point of collapse. And people think, oh yeah, so boomers, kids don't like their boomer parents because their boomer parents had it so rich. That's a propaganda operation. And you see conservatives promoting this garbage.
You sure do.
Matt Walsh, for instance, has been promoting this stuff. And so, it's disgusting. What is Marxism? We are given three institutions to govern us. We're given the church, the family, and civil government. Every one of those is under attack. Every one of them is being divided. Divide the families. That's why the transgender movement's there. Weaken the families. That's why the feminist movement came along. Now you've got this intergenerational stuff as well being added to the mix. It's a pretty perfect storm. But what most Americans have trouble getting their heads around, they just think this is a bad social phenomenon. No, this is deliberately fostered by people from Russia, China, who have major institutes.
Iran, Qatar.
Who study us like we are ants in an ant farm. They have hundreds of people working on studying our psychology, our history, our weak points, our strong points, and crafting messaging and educational memes to divide us, to weaken us in
100%.
every possible way.
And Trevor, 5 or 6 of these things happening at one time should cause you to sit up and take a notice. But that all of these are taking place at the same time is not coincidental. Manufactured hostility between people groups. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on this one. And I call it people groups, not racism, because there's only one race, the human race, many people groups. And the former highest ranking black communist in America flipped on communism. Manning Johnson wrote a book called Color Communism and Common Sense, warning how even back in the mid-1900s, Russia, the Soviet Union was grabbing black men, bringing them to America, from America to the Soviet Union, teaching them in the Lenin School, and then sending them back in here. I think it was Time magazine in 1917 called one of these leaders the blackest red in America. Time magazine talked about one of these leaders.
Yeah. Well, look, the racial politics since the time of Stalin has been a major part of the communist playbook. In New Zealand, they do it with the Maori people. In Australia, they do it with the Aborigines. In Finland, they do it with the Laplanders. In America, they do it with the blacks, the Latinos, the Native Americans, and the Asian Americans. Any racial difference they can find, they exploit it. Well, and the government's plan to this, like any parent knows, the surest way to destroy your own family is to treat your children by different standards. You favor one over another. You punish one, but you don't punish the other. You do that for long enough, your family's going to just fold. Every parent spends most of their time trying to be as evenly balanced as they can when it comes to dealing with their kids. Well, create a society where different groups are treated differently, where Native Americans get special privileges, where blacks get lots of welfare. What's it going to do? It's going to create resentment. It's going to create division. Wow, I wonder if that's what was intended. Yes, absolutely. It's the communists call it the nationalities question. They have the class struggle where the workers fight the bosses, but they have the nationalities question where minority nationalities are encouraged down a separatist or oppositional path to the mainstream, racial group, whether it's white or whatever. They'll always find the minorities and stir them against the majority with separatist groups, independence groups, outwardly racist groups, or whatever, like the Nation of Islam, for instance. That's all part of the strategy.
The drastic and violent increase in anti-Semitism to create a perceived Jewish problem in order to distract from the Islamic Revolution in America?
100%, and that is driven by Qatar, by Iran, and especially by Russia. Russia is putting huge amounts of resources into dividing the US right, in particular, over the Israel issue. And this is coming through the Ron Paul Institute, it's coming through QAnon, it's coming through Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and many others. That is a Russian operation. The Chinese and the Muslims mainly target the left. They've pretty much separated the Democratic Party from Israel now, and the Russians are working heavily to divide the conservative movement over the Israel issue. And you see, this is why Nick Fuentes is doing what he's doing. This is why you see Tucker Carlson going completely gaga when it comes to Israel. These are all pro-Russian people.
The sexualization of children to destroy their conscience, their self-will, and their belief in God. And your belief in God, that just for folks know, the kids that are molested or sexualized and abused, and I know friends of mine that are adults who came out to talk about how they were molested as children. One of the things they openly struggled with was God. Why would God allow this to happen to me? Why would a loving God must hate me. I must be destined for hell because God must hate me because only a God that hates me would allow this to have happened to me. Now, one of my friends who came out very vocally speaking about this, Michael Reagan, and wrote the book, and I was his literary agent on his book, Twice Adopted, obviously was able to work through this. And he wrote about it in his book that I was his literary agent on, Twice Adopted. But a lot of kids that are abused, it really is a serious blow to their belief in God or wanting a relationship with the Lord. So sexualization of children to destroy their conscience, their right and wrong, their moral compass, if you will, their self-will, because now they're kind of molding into a group and just following, and then their belief in God. You agree with this one?
Yeah, look, 100%. You know, well, you look at it, and Lara Logan has raised this point. Why do these pedophile rings, why do satanic and communist type people target children? Because children are the purest. You know, they are nearest to God. If you want to insult God, you want to degrade humanity, corrupt the children. There's nothing more evil than that. And so that is why we see this happen. And as you say, if a young person is degraded and treated that way, it's going to be very hard for them to live a normal life, very hard for them to hold strong moral values because they've had such a bad example at an early age, and very hard for them to form any lasting religious belief. And all of those things are integral to preserving our society and the integrity of the individual. So absolutely, the sexualization of children, and if the left keeps going, we will see the legalization of pedophilia in this 100% country.
We will.
There's
You're right.
No doubt about that. And what the heck are you going to do? How are you going to protect your kids when you cannot legally protect them from predators? How are you going to do that? Imagine, why would you even have kids in those circumstances?
Destruction of the family unit in order to destroy the incubator for passing on the values that maintain the republic.
Well, that's been going for a long time. The feminist movement was deliberately started by the communists for this purpose. The radical gay movement has played a very big role in that. Deliberate welfare policies, the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, who put so many mothers on welfare that destroyed the black communities. Before the Great Society, blacks in America had lower divorce rates and lower illegitimacy rates than the white communities.
And they were entrepreneurs. There were so many black businesses.
Yeah. They were rising in every dynamic, but they were still tending towards the bottom of the heap economically. So they were most impacted by the welfare policies, which basically destroyed the families. And those welfare policies were designed by Michael Harrington, who was employed by LBJ to write his Great Society policies. Michael Harrington was the founder of Democratic Socialist America, a hardcore Marxist. The damage that that man has done to families in America is just incalculable.
The use of social media algorithms in order to reinforce division, hatred, hopelessness, dehumanization, nihilism, life has no ultimate meaning, hedonism, all there is pleasure, and violence. The social algorithms in order to reinforce these divisions.
Well, if our enemies can skew the internet or our sources of information to feed corrupting materials to us 24/7, and I've heard reliable commentators say to influence elections by 5 to 10 points. If they can do that, well, they can demoralize a society very, very quickly. And we all know from reading, Yuri Bezmenov and people like that, the demoralization is a critical part of the road to revolution.
The creation of exhaustion, fear, anxiety, and perpetual crisis that results in a herd mentality sets the stage for mass adjustability and surrender of civil rights and liberties for the promise of safety, protection, and a return to normalcy.
Did we see any of that during COVID?
Exactly,
Brandon?
right?
That was a classic example. Destabilize, promote massive fear, don't offer any rational solutions, get people confused, get people isolated. They can't go to church, they can't seek comfort, they get demoralized, and they get off kilter. Well, that's one example, but there are many, many like that. These psyops that are continually keeping us. Well, like I was talking to my wife the other day, and she would say 10 years ago when she started writing stories, you'd get a story, there'd be a big scandal come up, you'd spend a week investigating it and developing it and writing articles about it before the next one came along. Now there's 3 a day. What do you do? 5 a day. You can't keep up with it. So people are in a constant state of tension. Or they turn off completely because it's very hard. There's such sensory overload and such confusion and so many contradictory messages, and people are so rudderless that it's very easy to create a destabilized society.
And of course, today it came out that there was a biolab found in a garage in Las Vegas. We had one in Redley, California last year, 2023, I should say. I mean, I think these are all over the country. I think a lot of them are Chinese. Gordon Chang and I've talked about that. These are all over the country. And, they can release these things, whether it's the shadow government, the deep state, in concert with China or anyone else. Anytime they need to invoke enough fear and trauma, they can let some of these rip and, again, use this creation of exhaustion, fear, and anxiety and herd mentality to surrender more liberties and freedoms. Attack upon leaders listen to this one, attack upon leaders through intimidation, threats, physical attacks, assassinations, lawfare, deplatforming, debanking, and shadow banning in order to eliminate and neutralize leaders and discourage their replacement.
Well, look, I know for a fact there was much anecdotal evidence when the 2020 election was stolen. There was many politicians who would like to have said something about this, but Black Lives Matter had just rampaged through the place and Antifa was on the go, and many legislators didn't want their house burnt down. They didn't want the grief that would come with it for making a stand. It's very, so that atomizes these people, and that's why you wonder why there's no great opposition to some of these things. And so, yes, the discrediting of leaders, the exposing of blackmail and compromising materials, as we're seeing now, lawfare against I don't know how many lawsuits Ted Cruz has had against him, how many Donald Trump had thrown at him. So it's crippling leaders, and making. I know a lot of very good people who would make great Congress members or city commissioners, and they don't want the grief. They don't want to be constantly abused and threatened, and their families threatened by standing up for what is right. And so the only leaders that come forward tend to be the wimpy leaders who just are just in it for their own personal glory. And the ones who will make a difference are often intimidated from doing so.
Three more. Creation of hate crime laws that criminalize free speech and empowers a network of snitches and informants in order to create division and discourage the organization of resistance among citizens. We saw this during COVID. Yeah. They were creating snitch hotlines, right? Wait till they get hate crime laws and they're reporting every post under the sun, which they can already do, by the way. But I mean, talk about that, criminalization of free speech and empowering networks of snitches and informants.
Well, this all started with the Vincent Chin case in the 90s, where a Chinese man was murdered by a couple of thugs up in Detroit. But this was Maoist. This was the Maoist communist groups in America got hate speech laws implemented in virtually every state. And completely subverted the Constitution. Now, these laws can be now used to intimidate anybody. You know, you call out Chinese influence in your community. Well, you're vilifying a group. Talk about Muslim plans for your community. Well, no, you're now an Islamophobic, and you could be transgressing the law. You know, we see this in Britain way worse than it is in America. You know, people get arrested for Facebook posts over there. So yeah, that's. But they got to say, the hate speech legislation, I'll say it categorically, was a Maoist, communist-driven program that swept this country in the 90s, and even most conservatives and Republicans have no idea and are not prepared to fight back against it.
Listen to this one. Two more. Turning medical institutions and medical care into an instrument for radical politicalization, dehumanization, terrorizing, and elimination of political, cultural, and religious opposition. And I don't know if you've seen some of the videos that have come out in the last few weeks and months and years. Nurses, anesthesiologists, other people talking horrifically about how they want to and would treat any Christian, conservative, or MAGA person coming into the hospital. Jewish, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. You know, so the medical profession tends to be very heavily unionized, and the unions are all controlled by communists. So the leaders of these groups, the leaders of these industrial groups, almost all Marxists. So they push this in that direction. And any legitimate nurse out there, or and say, look, in Australia recently there was a controversy as two Muslim nurses talked about how they'd deliberately mistreat. They posted this on TikTok, how they deliberately mistreat Jewish patients. And I don't know if they got fired, but, they didn't get penalized as they should have. And so, this is exactly right, and so conservatives don't have a lot of confidence in their medical system because, we'll put it this way, you wouldn't want to be admitted to hospital with a heart attack while you were wearing a Trump T-shirt, would you?
No, definitely not. And the final one, the hijacking of language and words to use for the purpose of weaponization against patriots and Christians for the purpose of marginalizing, characterizing, and terrorizing them.
Yeah.
So now Christians are Islamophobic, Christians are bigots,
Christian nationalists,
domestic terrorists.
Yeah. What used to be considered a normal conservative patriotic Christian is now a Christian nationalist, which is a borderline term for fascist. And this started with the communists again, because the communists always called any opposition to communism at all fascist. You could be a liberal and opposed to communism, you would be a fascist. And that's what they use they hang that label on any anti-communist, any conservative. And so then you've got the Islamophobe, the homophobe, the whatever, the Christian nationalist, all of these slandered terms, none of which the left doesn't have many any terms directed against them. But you'll see these terms on TV every night. You'll see them on current affairs program. You see it on The View. You'll see it on whatever. These denigration and dehumanization of basic patriotic Christian Americans.
Well, Trevor, this is my list I came up with. Again, I woke up last night.
Very comprehensive, Brandon. I don't think you've missed much.
Well, thank you.
Very comprehensive.
I woke up last night, as I said, I was dreaming about, my dream was about Americans are not prepared for the Civil War that's coming. They don't see all the signs. And in my mind, in my dream, I started rattling off these in my mind. And I woke up, I thought, why am I having a dream about this? I should be resting, not working. Went back to sleep and the dream kept going. And it's happened 2 or 3 times. So when I got up this morning, I just made my list. Now, many of these things you and I have talked about for years. They're in my books and documentaries. You've talked about them. I just decided to compile a more complete list that I could come up with. But
you should post it out, Brandon.
Well, I'm going to definitely. We're putting this out as an article. But I think, Trevor, I am to the belief now that the train is too far down the track and the bridge is out and the train can't stop. They're too embedded in the federal government. They're too embedded in the courts. They're too embedded in law enforcement, the military, local, state, federal governments. This is too big of a correction that's needed by one man, one administration, and his own administration between the advisors that giving him, bogus counsel, and then the deep state people that are getting rid of people like Ed Martin that we're hearing.
Yeah,
Paul Sperry.
I saw that. Yeah.
This is exactly what we're talking about. Ed Martin, apparently has been let go from his position at the DOJ where he was helping with the weaponization stuff. Now, if that report, which I'm read today from Paul Sperry, is accurate, we've got so much compromise inside the administration from the deep state people that I think are still there that I just don't know that, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I want to prepare my audience. And I'm thinking we're reaching a point where this was our last chance to clean this system out and to see the Insurrection Act used where it needs to be, to see arrests, grand juries. And I guess what my warning to my audience is they need to prepare for what seems to me going to be inevitable. I don't think this is going to get fixed through the political legal process because the long march to those institutions has really weakened them and taken them over. I think what's coming for America is indeed some kind of civil war, turmoil, and or civil war mixed with World War III. I don't know how we can get around it at this point.
It's very hard to imagine. I'm always hopeful. I'm always optimistic. I think, God's hand is at work here. If enough people stand up, if enough grassroots citizens and Christians stand up, maybe we can avert this or delay this. But I think you're right in your analysis. I really don't think President Trump understands it well enough, and he has too many scumbags around him, too many dangerous operators like Tulsi Gabbard and others, and Tucker Carlson, who are leading things in the wrong direction. So, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we can correct, but, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I think every American should be preparing for the worst here and still working for the best, because ultimately this is a spiritual battle, and that's the realm this is going to be decided in. But we live in bodies. We need to eat. We need to have medicines. We need to educate our kids. So we have to be prepared. I think whatever happens, Brandon, is probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better, if it does get better.
And again, I don't want to give doom and gloom, but I do want to give preparedness, right? I want to give people an understanding of what's happening. And I again, 3 or 4 or 5 of these things happening is bad, but when all of these things are happening at the same time, that's not coincidental. And the hyper release of these Epstein files now, they could have released these things at the beginning of the term, but they wait now until we're into the 2026 with the midterms coming up to do this. And there's supposedly more coming out. There's so many things happening that I'm thinking about the timing of this, right? Even the discovery of this biolab in Las Vegas, the timing of all this. These things tell me these are either warning signs that God is graciously giving to us, or these are signs, again, of a cumulative effect that is finally going to snap the republic. And I want people to be aware, but I also want them to understand. If they're trying to understand why do my grown children have such animosity toward me? Well, it's probably because you're a conservative and a Christian. You know, why are so many of the young people being told that the fault of the nations is the baby boomers? Because this is part of a generational war to divide people and families and remove the moral influence of older generations. I'm trying to give people a context of how the worldview war plays out with our national enemies. And hopefully you and I have done that tonight, Trevor.
Well, I think we have, Brandon, and you're absolutely right. We see these phenomena, and most people, because they don't understand how communism works or how diabolical it is, they can't conceive of a concerted plan going on for decades to weaken this country at every single possible juncture, every weak point. We got to understand the Russians have their Institute for the Study of the US and Canada. They have hundreds of people working on how to undermine America every day. The Chinese have similar institutions. So do the Iranians. You think these countries don't want to take us down? Do you think they don't have the resources to learn more about us? We have an open society. Americans don't think in these terms. So even when you tell them, they find it hard to believe. But that's what's happening. It's 100% what's happening.
TrevorLoudon.com, all of his great books, his great articles, and so much more there. TrevorLoudon.com, TrevorLoudon.com. Trevor, there are not many people that I can call up and just go back and forth. You're one of 2 or 3 people I can do this with, and we sure are thankful for you.
Well, it's a pleasure, Brandon, and likewise, all of that list, you thought that out, and I couldn't disagree with a single point, and I couldn't think of any others either. I'm sure there's 1 or 2, but no, it's good. I think it's a very valuable connection, and I credit you for your years and years of work at this, Brandon. Not many people have done the work you've done on this.
Well, it's a team effort. We learn from each other, and we help and support each other, and you're a part of that team. Thank you, Trevor.
Most welcome. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Trevor Loudon checking in. Folks, I hope you will check out his great books, historical books, at TrevorLoudon.com, TrevorLoudon.com. We'll be right back.
True beauty isn't applied. It's nourished from within. Bella Grace Elixir, a luxurious, scientifically crafted blend designed to restore radiance, vitality, and strength at a cellular level. At the heart of Bella Grace Elixir lies Cat's Claw, a powerful herb from the Amazon known for its ability to control inflammation and protect collagen. With Verisol collagen peptides, it goes beyond the surface, stimulating your body's natural collagen production to reduce fine lines, improve skin elasticity, and promote real, visible change. Bella Grace Elixir doesn't stop at collagen. It includes astaxanthin, one of nature's most powerful antioxidants. 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, astaxanthin protects your skin from harmful UV rays and environmental stress, while locking in hydration and promoting a radiant, youthful glow. Experience the power of nature with Bella Grace Elixir at melissahousebg.com. Discover the science behind Bella Grace Elixir at melissahousebg.com. Read powerful testimonials from doctors and real customers who've experienced life-changing results, and explore other wellness products from Bella Grace. Bella Grace Elixir is more than just a product. It's a solution. Visit melissahousebg.com today.